because in addition to the rainfall, because the ground was so saturated, we had many areas that were prone to flooding and landslides. So it has been quite wet, quite overcast, and as is expected for this time of year, we are in the hurricane season. So, this is not unusual weather for us.
Well, could you send some of that rain across, or down rather, to Grenada? We would really love to have some of that. We've been having some dry spells, and we can do with some rain.
Really, that's unusual. I actually thought that the entire Caribbean was experiencing wet conditions. So we would gladly send some to you. We always like to be neighborly.
Okay, great. Tell us a little bit about St. Lucia, though. I know that there are quite a lot of publicity and challenge to individual territories about keeping the environment safe and clean and keeping in mind the importance of what climate change is in fact doing. Do we find a hype in St. Lucia? Is there much publicity of the subject matter over there?
It depends. For the last 2 years, COVID-19 has basically sucked all the oxygen out of the room. So the preoccupation of everyone, government and citizens alike, has really been with COVID-19 and getting through this pandemic and dealing with the economic fallout from COVID-19. As you know, St. Lucia is a country with an economy that is very highly dependent on tourism, and what COVID-19 did with its impact on global travel really did have a significant impact on our economy. So I would say yes, climate change is an ever-present issue. It's an issue that has always has occupied the attention of solutions. I would say going back to 2015, when we had the very successful 1.5 to Stay Alive civil society, Caribbean civil society climate change campaign, which St. Lucia was very much involved in at the time. I was the minister leading both St. Lucia and the Caribbean delegation to COP21. So I think from that time, St. Lucians have had an increased understanding and awareness of climate change. Many people will meet me on the street and, start a climate change conversation with me, which is gratifying, which is heartening. But as all Caribbean countries, we have so many other things occupying our attention: crime, unemployment, as I said, COVID-19 and non-communicable diseases, inflation, the high cost of energy, the high cost of food because of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So climate change is competing for attention with all of these other things.
Mr. Antoine, you're friends of the Earth in Grenada, and we go back a long time. We go back as far as 1984. That's quite a long time to know each other. And you've been very passionate about climate change and ensuring that the environment is kept clean and all that necessary to make sure that the world stands on safe pillars, so to speak, safe climatic pillars. You've been involved in that. How have you found the receptiveness in Grenada? Is there a pretty decent reception, or you think we've got a long way to go?
First of all, I want to thank James for agreeing to be on the same panel with me, because I don't think I'm worthy to be in his presence in terms of what he has been able to establish and contribute. But having said that, I also want to thank the IAGDO and a group of young people from the Caribbean who are observing Climate Adaptation Week that it's causing me to be here. So, but to answer your question, it's a mixture. To me, it seems as though people are still confused what is climate change. When they talk about climate change, they talk about ozone layer in the same sentence, which I think is very interested. But let me quote a statement by James, which he said some time ago when he was, I think, still minister. He says, climate change has to be taken seriously. It is a major threat to the sustainability of the world as we know it. He said also, while for some, climate change is an academic discussion or some sort of esoteric concept, for us, the Caribbean, for us, sorry, my thing was, sorry. For us in the Caribbean, we are living climate change. I wanted to emphasize that we are living, and you said something at the beginning, will. It's not will, it's already happening. Look, the heat. The heat is killing us. And last year, I was on a webinar with the late Dr. Hugh Seeley, and he agreed that the heat is already killing us.
So there are reasons to be concerned.
Yeah, plants are being affected. Look at all the plants that have been affected with all those diseases and so on. It's very serious, and we need to take it seriously. And he's made a statement way back when, in fact, at a workshop in 2014. This was one of the statements that we highlighted in climate change workshop.
Yeah. Mr. Fletcher, can I come back to you? Is there any confusion with the two terms, climate change and global warming? Are they used interchangeably, or one is a subset of the other? What's the situation? Just to clarify and help people to understand.
Yeah, just to continue with what Mr. Antoine said, he's absolutely right. Some people do still confuse the ozone layer and the efforts that we made to close the hole in the ozone layer with climate change. And sometimes you hear people interchangeably speak about climate change on the ozone layer, and it's something that, we certainly have to get people to understand that there's a difference. But to your question about global warming and climate change, absolutely. Global warming is what is causing climate change. And we have global warming because we are producing so many of what are called greenhouse gases. And when we speak about greenhouse gases, we're really speaking about primarily three gases: carbon dioxide, which is produced from burning fossil fuels like gasoline, all of the oil derivatives, of which gasoline is one, coal, and natural gas, to create energy in the electricity sector so that we can have electricity to power our homes, or for the transportation sector with gasoline and diesel in our vehicles. Every time we burn fossil fuels, we create carbon dioxide. Every time we have animals that are, we've always heard about respiration. Anytime there's respiration, you produce more carbon dioxide. The other greenhouse gas is methane, or methane, depending on how you pronounce it. And methane you get from livestock. It's one of the byproducts of livestock. When livestock metabolize, when they respire, they produce methane gas. You also get it from landfills. It's one of the products you get anytime there's decaying material. You get methane gas being produced. And the third one is nitrous oxide, which again you get from fossil fuels, from the fossil fuel industry, but you also get it from fertilizers. Those three gases, when they release, they go up into the atmosphere and they form a covering around our planet. They basically form a layer around the planet, which is very similar to the kind of layer you get in a greenhouse. If you've ever stood in a greenhouse in the middle of the day, you realize that the greenhouse is warmer, hotter than outside the greenhouse. And that's because the greenhouse has this plastic or glass, whichever one they use, and that traps the heat and it prevents the heat from escaping. These three gases are called greenhouse gases because they have the same effect. They form this layer around our planet, around Earth, and that layer, as it gets thicker and thicker, it traps more of the heat that we generate on this planet. It traps it and it radiates it back onto the planet. So as we produce more greenhouse gases, as our planet warms up, and that's what we refer to as global warming. Climate change is the long-term change that we see in the elements of our climate. So things like weather pattern, precipitation pattern. So how much rainfall we get, how much snow we get, how much humidity you get, how warm it gets, how your oceans are rising because your ice caps on the North Pole and the South Pole, your glaciers are now starting to melt because the temperatures are getting warmer. So your ice caps are melting and your ocean temperatures are increasing. All of these are elements of climate change. Your oceans are getting warmer, so your coral reefs are dying. Your oceans are absorbing more carbon dioxide, so they're getting more acidic. Those are all impacts of climate change. So climate change is very, very broad. Climate change encompasses a wide, long-term view of what is happening with our climate. And some people also confuse is weather and climate. They'll tell you about how you have climate change and you say it's getting warmer, but you have all this snow falling in the United States right now. And we have to explain to them that is weather. The weather is what is happening instantaneously. Your weather is not changing. But if you look at what is happening to your weather over an extended period of time, 15, 20 years, you could see changes in your precipitation, your rainfall, your temperatures, and that is what we refer to as climate change. So global warming is one of the causes of climate change, the primary cause of climate change, and is one of the things when we talk about climate change, you get the heat, as Mr. Antoine spoke about. The sobering fact is, as hot as it is this year for you in Grenada and for us in St. Lucia, this probably will be the coolest summer that we will experience for the rest of our lives, because it is continuing to get hotter and hotter and hotter. So that's what we speak about, this long-term change in our climate. It's a long-term effect.
Yeah. Well, I think we live in a world, quite obviously, where things are changing very fast and the world is becoming more and more industrialized. And the fact that the world is becoming more and more industrialized, you'll find, of course, fuel and all of these things have to be used, and there'll be so much more carbon monoxide, etc., emitted, so to speak. Is it something that could have been avoided or could be avoided, Mr. Antoine? It's an industrial age we are in now.
Well, I mean, at the beginning of the industrial age, maybe not, but at some time it became very obvious that we could do something about it. The knowledge for alternative energy has been around. Okay. But whether it's been an attractive profit proposition for those people with money is another thing. In fact, one of my theory, if you want to call it, until we take out money as the main factor of profit, as Vandenda Shiva from India says, the logic of profit and the logic of life are two different things. Money doesn't care what it does to life and to the planet. And because money represents also power. It's also tied up with military and so on. And so we need to really, in a way, the citizens of the world need to wake up and decide what kind of world we want. So, for instance, climate action is not so much about the climate we need as to the climate, as to the climate change we want. So we could, in a blink of an eye, change things if we want, but the people whose profit is at stake, they wouldn't do it. And that's why the people of the world have to wake up. And this is not trying to make the world socialist or communist and so on. It's just that what we know as capitalism. In fact, I was reading something today by a statement that was made about 2015 by 13 or 11 Amazon countries, chiefs, Amazon chiefs. They said that colonialism is the cause of climate change. They said that. In a statement they said. So in a lot of ways, the system is you see, when we elevated the economics over everything else, since Adam Smith time, we have been, what you call the economy has been, I say, colonizing the rest of life. You could see it even in here, in the store. You go to the cemetery, money is in the cemetery, through the tombs, everything, even everything is about money. So unless we de-emphasize the role of money and elevate life, then we would have a problem.
All right.
And then again, the role that the fossil fuel industry play, where they can make things go up one time and make it go down and so on. We need to find a better way to live in this world.
So it's going to be quite obvious. It's quite obvious that the entire world will be affected by climate change. There's no question about that. And though we live in the Caribbean, and though we do not produce anywhere close to some of the great industrialized countries in terms of emissions, we still will be affected badly. Now, we're going to touch a little bit on that, but let me ask quickly, Mr. Fletcher, how important is the North and South Pole to the world as a whole, to Earth as a whole? Are they really significant? And if they are, just explain to us.
Well, they are. They play a significant role in the moderation of temperatures across the planet. you have two major bodies of ice in the Arctic and in the Antarctic, the North Pole and the South Pole. And they go through these cycles every year. So during the summertime, there's a certain amount of ice that melts from both the North Pole and the South Pole. And during the wintertime, some of that ice is reformed. What is happening right now is that ice is melting at an unprecedented rate. So for example, in 2019, they found that the rate of ice melting in Greenland in the North Pole was what scientists had predicted would be the worst case scenario by 2070. So in 2019, we were over 50 years ahead of schedule for the worst case scenario. I'm sure recently you heard about this glacier in the South Pole that is, as they say, hanging on by its fingernails because there has been so much melting that is taking place. As that ice starts to melt, what happens is that you have your sea levels will start to rise because what is ice is now becoming water and it's entering into the ocean. So sea levels will rise. As these sea levels rise, many of our Caribbean countries and countries in the Pacific, countries in the Indian Ocean that are all, in all of our countries, our communities are located around the coast because before there were airplanes, there were boats. So we moved around by boat. So we located many of our communities around the coast. In Grenada, no difference. In Lucia, your major cities, all of your economic infrastructure, your social infrastructure, your ports, your schools, your hospitals are all within very close proximity to the coast. So as your sea levels start to rise, you're putting settlements, you're putting economic and social infrastructure, your roads, all of these things in danger. There are countries in the Pacific, for example, countries like Marshall Islands, like Kiribati, where the highest point is less than 2 meters, less than 6 feet above sea level. Above sea level. So you're talking about if there is a 1 meter or 2 meter sea level rise by the end of the century, some of these countries will disappear. There's some islands in the Bahamas that will disappear. Some islands in the Caribbean, like Antigua and Barbados in particular, that are so low lying, that you will have significant sea level incursion, saltwater incursion, that a lot of the island will be underwater by the end of the century. But the other thing that's happening is that as a lot of that ice starts to melt, you get the permafrost that is at the bottom being exposed, and many things are happening. You have diseases that have been trapped in that ice for hundreds, thousands, millions of years. They're not dead. They've just been trapped dormant in that ice. As that ice melts, some of these viruses, some of these bacteria will now be unleashed, and you do not know what sort of new diseases we will have to deal with. But also, that black ice that is at the bottom, as that pristine white ice melts, now causes the sunlight to be absorbed more. So you're not reflecting sunlight, you're absorbing it. So you almost have a positive feedback taking place. So your temperatures on Earth will start to warm up even faster. And that's the point, I always like to make to people as a scientist. We look at the Earth as some kind of linear thing that you could do. You could sit in front of a computer and plug one or two things into an equation and you figure you could understand what's going on. It's not. The Earth is a biological living system. So as one thing happens one place, it causes a problem something else. It's just like your body. If you start to experience a fever, for example, that fever now starts impacting your various organs, your kidney, your lungs, etc. And these things start shutting down. Our planet is no different. As the temperature increases past 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius, ecosystems start shutting down. Species start disappearing. Things that we depend on for life on Earth start being altered, and that affects the whole balance of life, and particularly more so in countries like ours in the Caribbean, where our ecosystems are so fragile, where all it takes is a fraction of a degree to cause a change. And that's why for us, we're even more vulnerable to climate change than some of the larger continental countries.
It's interesting you talk about some of the Caribbean countries and how vulnerable we are, and I picked up that research shows that Caribbean countries and economies are highly vulnerable. And there is a reference, in fact, about Jamaica. Jamaica, for example, is one of the world's top 40 climate hotspots. This means that Jamaica is one of the countries of the world that has been and will be worst affected by climate change. 25% of Jamaica's population lives on a coastal area. 90% of the country's total income is produced within these areas. That obviously will affect Jamaica, and of course the rest of the Caribbean can probably speak about similar statistics and stories. So let's just look at that a little bit, Mr. Antoine, and the whole idea of our vulnerable communities in the Caribbean and how impacting and how concerned we really should be.
First of all, it's been over the years, I felt a little bit uncomfortable when we sit and we blame the bigger countries for everything. And of course, they control the economic value system of the world. But then we do a lot of things here that we don't have to do. For instance, we have been cutting down plantations and so on for to set up tourist plants or plantation, for tourism, cutting down the mangroves and all the stuff that help to mitigate, to help us. So while what you say is very concerning, we have to ask ourselves, should we go that route? Why are we not going the eco route? In the sense that, why are we cutting trees down to plant sugar cane? Why are we cutting down mangroves? To facilitate so-called investment by people who are coming back. Like Arrow, one of them will say, hold on to your property and will it for your children. They're coming back for your sea and your shoes and so on. We are not thinking about that. We're not thinking about the future. And that's the problem. So even though we say about, the people dependent on, we have made it that way at a large extent. Because we have just, surrender. Where's our imagination? In the Pacific already, there are some countries, there are some places that are evacuating. And I suppose they have similar experience with us where they're dominated by powerful forces. But we could make a choice. And we can't do it alone. We had to do it as a region. We talk about CARICOM, but we don't behave like CARICOM. We have the possibility, if we put our hands and hearts together, we can help to navigate some of the issues that we're confronting. But everybody going to the World Bank, everybody going to the IMF, and all those institutions that are encouraging the destruction. So we need to think a different way. And although there's something we can't stop, like that advertisement on the radio with Grenada. And I don't agree with it at all, As a local consumer, you cannot influence global whatever. You could. Because if we as a nation, through solidarity and collective action, say, enough is enough, and all the other islands say that, we could find a way to make a statement, but we are all sucking into it. We are all giving into, and that's the trouble. Nobody seems to be on the creative side.
Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are dealing with the subject of climate change. There are quite a lot of things for us to learn and to talk about tonight, but we're going to take a short break here and then we'll be right back.
Do you know you can lower your electricity bill by creating an energy-efficient home? When planning to build or remodel, plan for your energy needs and utilize building techniques and products that promote energy efficiency. Incorporate renewable energy and maximize the use of natural lighting, heating, and ventilation sources. You should also buy 230-volt equipment, as these run more efficiently and can help lower your electricity usage. As As an individual consumer, I cannot impact global fuel prices. However, I can ease the burden of rising fuel rates by creating an energy-efficient home. What can you do?
Grenlec, energizing our Grenada.
Spare your pocket, spare the earth, always at Grenlec.
If there was ever a time to keep and stay healthy, it's now! We at Hills and Valley are here to help you take deliberate steps to maintain your health. We stayed true to maintaining the most comprehensive rates while stocking the widest range of medicines and health devices, including personal protective equipment. There are so many benefits shopping with us. You get great savings through discounts for senior citizens and reward cards for loyal customers. Ask about owning yours today. Visit us at Halifax and Grenville Street, St. George, Jubilee Street opposite the Grenville Bus Terminal, and at Hillsborough, Carriacou. Our wholesale distribution on Halifax Street also stocks the widest range of pharmaceuticals. We are with you on the hills and in the valleys. We are Hills and Valley Pharmacy.
Have you heard about the new soft weave bathroom tissue with total hygiene? As hygiene and safety have taken center stage, our bathroom tissue is now manufactured with 3 different technologies to offer the best protection for you and your family. UVC light technology for a safe and effective disinfection process, eliminating 99.9% of microorganisms. Also, production at high temperatures, killing all types of germs and bacteria. And it's pH controlled with delicate fibers to prevent irritation for even sensitive skin. Softweave Total Hygiene Bathroom Tissue, available in supermarkets and shops island-wide. Visit Softweave Caribbean Facebook or Instagram pages for more information.
Total is one of the world's largest oil companies with a top quality line of lubricants. Total Lubricants has a full product line from passenger cars, motorcycle, heavy industrial equipment, mining, trucking, agriculture, and manufacturing machines and vehicles. Total Lubricants, winning championships in motorsports, including Formula One and World Rally Championships. Total Lubricants are available at all Rubis service stations, leading automotive shops, and distributed by Huggins.
Gospel Explosion is finally here. Join the youth of the Grenada Conference of Seventh-day Adventists under the green and white tent at Progress Park in St. Andrews from Sunday, October 9th to the 29th at 7 p.m. and continuing nightly for an electrifying evangelistic experience like no other. Come hear the ever-exhilarating Pastor Oliver Scott shatter the kingdom of darkness with thundering messages from the Word of God. If you ever needed the Lord before, we sure do need Him now. Come find hope in the midst of your pain. See you there.
And welcome back. So we do know that emissions are rising all across the globe, and we are learning, for that matter, that the Earth is now at least 1.1 degrees Celsius hotter than it was back in the late 1800s. Now, 1.1, that doesn't sound very big, does it, Mr. Fletcher?
Well, it depends. The question I would ask you is if you were told that you have a fever, or your child has a fever, and that fever is 1 degree Celsius, would you 1 degree Celsius warmer than the child ought to be, or you ought to be, would you be concerned? You ought to be. So instead of your normal body temperature being, let's say, 97 degrees Fahrenheit, which is what it should be, let's assume it's 100 degrees Fahrenheit. I think you'd have every reason to be concerned, and every fraction of a degree goes up is how much more likely you are to suffer serious illness, serious organ damage. For us, every fraction of a degree is very important. As you quite rightly pointed out, we have seen an increase of around 1.1, 1.2 degrees Celsius every year for the last 8 years. The last 8 years have been the 8 hottest years in the history of our planet since we started recording temperatures in the 1840s, 1850s. So this is not something, like some people tell you, well, these things happen, you get these cycles. No, there's definitely a warming trend that is taking place, and there's quite a bit of work that has been done. Some very rigorous climate science, some of it done by the University of the West Indies, by people like Professor Michael Taylor, that research shows what the impact of 1.5 degrees Celsius, 2 degrees Celsius will be on us in the Caribbean. And, I think the mistake we make is by thinking that once we keep the temperature below 1.5 degrees, we're safe, but we're not. We're already seeing the impacts of 1.1, 1.2 degrees Celsius warming. We're seeing the increase in intensity of our hurricanes, because what is happening is our oceans are warmer. And as our oceans are warmer, that is fuel for these hurricanes. So once these hurricanes are formed, they have all this energy in these oceans that they can just take up. And that's why you're getting hurricanes intensifying so quickly, things going from a tropical storm to a Cat 1, Cat 2, Cat 3, Cat 4 in such a short space of time. When Hurricane Maria hit Dominica in 2017, that intensified from a Cat 1 to a Cat 5 in less than 24 hours. Dominica thought it was going to be hit by a Cat 1, only to be hit by a Cat 5 plus hurricane with winds of over 170 miles an hour. So the warmer it gets, the more devastating it becomes for us, not just with hurricanes, but with our marine ecosystem being damaged. So the fishes that you'd expect to be getting, we all coastal communities, we all depend on the fishery sector. We have fishers who go out to sea. They're not getting the catch that they used to get before because the fish are now migrating to other waters. You now have oceans that are absorbing more carbon dioxide and becoming more acidic. So things like your shellfish, your lobster, your shrimp, these things can't form shells because the water is a little too acidic, or they're starting to have difficulty forming shells. Your availability of water, your water cycles are changing. So when you should be getting, you just said to me that you need water in Grenada. Now this is unprecedented. You're in the middle of the hurricane season and you're saying to me that Grenada is dry, and that is what you're getting. You're getting a lot of variability. So when you should be getting rainfall, you're not getting rainfall. So in most of our islands, our agriculture depends on rainfall. It's rain-fed. We don't have massive irrigation systems where we can ensure that we get water year-round. So if your farmers can't get access to water for their crops, their vegetables, their tree crops, your food security is being impacted. And that is what we're seeing right now. We are on track from the kinds of policies and pledges that are on the table by the developed countries. We will probably see warming of close to 2.5, 2.6 degrees Celsius by the end of this century. That will be catastrophic for us in the Caribbean, catastrophic for all small island developing states. And we can't afford to have that, which is why we have to intensify the pressure on the developed countries to start moving away from that reliance they have on fossil fuels and burning fossil fuels. So even when we had the Paris Agreement, and I was in Paris, one of those who was negotiating for the Paris Agreement, and we had this landmark agreement that we adopted in 2015, we signed in 2016. Since we signed the Paris Agreement, the developed countries, the so-called G20, the biggest 20 economies in the world, have pumped $3.3 trillion into the fossil fuel sector. So at the same time, they are making promises to us that they're going to decarbonize, they're going to move away from using oil, and they're going to start using wind and solar and other forms of renewable energy. They are pumping more and more money into the fossil fuel sector. So they certainly are not walking the talk, and that is why we're seeing our temperatures continue to increase every single year, and our lives are being put at risk. There are many Grenadians, I'm sure, who remember what happened with Hurricane Ivan. The chances of Hurricane Ivan being even more catastrophic now are greater because you have better conditions for a hurricane to form and a hurricane to intensify. So heaven forbid you have anything approaching an Ivan in any one of our islands. This last hurricane that just went through the United States, they found that climate change increased its intensity by 10%. Now imagine Dominica experiencing a 10% more intense Hurricane Maria than the one it experienced in 2017, or the BVI experiencing a 10% more intense Hurricane Irma than it experienced in 2017. These are scary prospects, and we don't have any place we can run to. So in the United States, for example, when Tampa Bay or West Palm Beach or South Carolina gets hit by a hurricane, the life in the rest of the U.S. goes on as normal. Life in Texas, life in New England, life in California goes on as normal. When any one of our countries is hit by a hurricane, the entire country grinds to a halt because the entire country is impacted. We can't say, boy, okay, you know what? It's Grenville, that was it, but St. George's is fine. Or it's Mico, that was it, or Denry, that was it, but Castries is fine. The entire country is impacted by a hurricane because we're small islands. So these are some of the things that we have to bear in mind, and that's why we really have to intensify the pressure on the developed countries, because they are putting us in a place where lives are at risk and livelihoods are being lost, and that cannot be just. That cannot be fair to people who have not contributed one iota to the problem.
We are learning, viewers, that the months of June to August 2023 have seen a tremendous heightened climatic situation across the globe. The global surface temperature has really risen quite dramatically. In fact, it's the highest in 143 years. That, to me, is big reason to be concerned, isn't it?
Concerned. In fact, I did in June completed a course with Columbia University and a group in Trinidad, and I enjoyed Trinidad. And one of the first lessons that was done by a doctor from Suriname out of Atlanta, one of the things that stuck with me is that she said, she's in public health, that the heat we are experiencing now is affecting every organ of the body. And it's a heat that is not going away because of the vapor in the atmosphere. I'm not a scientist like Dr. Fletcher, so please forgive me. Maybe not me explain, as eloquent as him. But the vapor that comes from the ocean remains in circulation. Mm-hmm. So it affects that the heat is there. So even when you have a shower and so on, it still doesn't help you a bit. That's why I saw not too long ago somebody from Kenya saying she's fed up because she takes a shower all throughout the day and the heat, like it want to kill you. So these are things we need to be concerned about. But also we are what a challenge as a region. So we need to take this serious, and that's why when Dr. Fletcher said some years ago that climate change needs to be taken seriously, we endorse that. And been trying to ask our governments and others, so let's take this thing serious and let's do something collectively, not just talk money, because unfortunately, most of the people who talk about climate talk about money. Money, to me, is a minuscule part of the thing, is about principle and values. Capitalism cannot get us to heaven. It has destroyed the planet. And we're going deeper into it. And I'm not saying we need to go to socialism or communism. I'm saying we need a new something else, more ecologically sensitive, where nature and life is at the center, not profit and money.
Okay, so let's come home, and this, of course, will not be foreign to us in Grenada or in St. Lucia, as the case may be. We have a landfill here in Grenada. I'm not sure where it is in St. Lucia. I can't quite remember. But we talk about the emission of methane. How dangerous is this? And if it is that dangerous, do we have alternative measures in terms of the eradication of or refuse and garbage, etc., etc.? What it is we are doing here in Grenada that is not healthy for us?
Well, Dr. Fletcher might be able to give a more thing as a scientist, but I will tell you what from my vantage point. The first thing we need to do is examine our consumption pattern. Most of what we consume will come from outside. It's packaged, it's processed, it has some kind of container which you have to dispose, that has its own problems. So we have to check on that first. Can we, most of the things we need to use for survival, can we produce it here? You know, I was shocked a few years ago when we imported ginger. Just imagine, ginger. So we need to think about that, but also we need to ask people to be more sensitive when they're disposing stuff. We put everything together, and we need to, for instance, it aches me that we are robbing the land of nutrients by throwing everything in the landfill. Of course, a lot of it is poisonous because what we import in any case is poisonous in any, whether we think it's food, but it's poisonous already, toxic to begin with. So we need, the thing about it is we need to have a collective, collaborative approach where we ask certain fundamental questions. What kind of future do we want for not just we living here, but those who live after? Because our ancestors, in spite of hardship and so on, were able to help to preserve an order of life, notwithstanding poverty and so on, that we could benefit from now. Okay. What we are doing, that we are upsetting that. So our consumption pattern, first of all, has to be examined. And also we need to move away from the throwaway society. I find it hard to throw away anything, call me a hoarder, because I always feel you can use something, anything for some other reason. But we've been taught, consumer society, and we don't link it also. For instance, we want cheap things that the Bangladeshis and the Haitians and others who are paid low wages in squalor conditions to produce. We want those things readily available, not realizing that we are impoverishing other people. I was fortunate to have traveled in certain parts of the world, and I was in the Amazon. And for the same energy, the Amazon in Ecuador in particular was poisoned to produce oil for the United States. So the farmers couldn't even produce when they should, because the land is poisoned. I'm saying we need to think about our consumption pattern, how we are contributing to these kind of existential threat to humanity.
Okay. Mr. Fletcher, let me come back to you in regards to landfill. And I think all over the region we know about it. Could you comment about this? The dangers involved.
Yeah, every single landfill generates methane gas, but I think we have to be a little bit careful that we don't beat ourselves up over St. Lucia's contribution to the global inventory of greenhouse gases is 0.0015%. That's less than 1/100%. So we are not the cause of the problem. So we have to be careful sometimes in imposing solutions on in coming up with solutions. We don't beat ourselves up and make it more difficult. I agree with everything Mr. Antoine said, that we need to move to a much more sustainable society, one where we reuse. So you encourage people to do composting as much as possible. Don't throw away your kitchen waste, your vegetable waste. Put it in a compost bin, allow it to decompose, and use that for you to create a kitchen garden. With the cost of food items these days, I would encourage every single person to have a kitchen garden. I grow as much as I can in my kitchen garden at home. All my seasonings, everything, I do them at home because one, it's better for me. It's healthier. I know that I'm producing food products that were not produced with any pesticides or insecticides. Secondly, I'm reducing on my household food bill. But thirdly, I'm also contributing towards food security. And every single bit of garden waste I have, I put it in the compost bin and I recycle it. Now, what the country can do nationally is to see how it can move to a zero waste, a zero landfill society. And one of the ways of doing that, again, is to encourage people at the household level to do composting, but also to start segregating your waste. So all of your organic waste, you put it, your vegetable waste, you put it in the compost bin, and your plastics, you segregate that. So when it gets to the landfill, what the government can do is say, okay, we're going to try to have a waste to energy facility where a lot of that energy that has a caloric value, that if you burn it, you could produce energy. We will use that, and instead of letting it decay, and some of it does not decay. If you put plastics in a landfill, it'll be years and years and hundreds of years before some of these things are not biodegradable. But if you burn them in a controlled waste to energy facility, you could get energy. So we can do some of these things as a country. Now, Grenada, like St. Lucia, may not be producing enough waste to make waste to energy cost effective as an energy solution. But if you look at it as an environmental solution, where we're saying, okay, we will put in a subsidy there, because not having a landfill, I don't know what it's like in Grenada, but we have a landfill in St. Lucia in Dayglow. That's where the landfill is located. That landfill probably has another 3 to 5 years of productive life in it. When that landfill has reached its capacity, I do not know where is the next hole, the next place that the government can find to establish the next landfill. We're not countries of infinite mass where we can move from one landfill to another. So you want to minimize on the amount of waste that is going to the landfill. So you want your government, first of all, to have a policy where it reduces on the importation of plastics and these other things that are not biodegradable. That's one thing. But secondly, you get people to do as much recycling as possible, as much reusing as possible. Mr. Antoine is right when he talks about changing our consumption and production patterns. That's very important. You don't need to buy the new iPhone. Every time iPhone 13 or 14 or 15 comes out, there are minuscule changes that are being made. You don't have to change your iPhone or your Samsung Galaxy every single time. And that's one of the things we do. We're chasing technology. We're chasing consumerism. Is driving us. Because we expose to all those images on television and what we see on CNN and on NBC, we want to have the same things that these people have in North America and in Europe as we have in the Caribbean. And all we're doing is just creating more electronic waste. So there must be a change in the way in which we view our society. Mr. Antoine spoke about sustainability, which is ensuring that you do not develop your society to the point where you are making it difficult for the next generation to meet their own needs. And that's what sustainable development is about. It's development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. My generation is going down as the generation that will pass on to its children, to the next generation, a worse planet, a worse environment than the one that I inherited and we inherited from our parents. That's a very bad legacy to have. But that is what we're doing. So we have to find a way to reverse that. We have to find a way. And people sometimes forget, or they don't understand. The Earth will survive. The planet will survive. What will happen is some species may not survive. And we may be one of those species that won't survive. But the planet won't die, Earth has gone through some of these massive changes before, and what happens is that some species go extinct, like dinosaurs and others, and new species take their place. It just may happen that we may be the first species that is contributing to its own extinction by what we're doing, and some other thing will take our place maybe in 250, 300 years. So that can't be our legacy. There must be a balance among people, planet, and profits. Nobody's saying that you should not be profit driven. You need the economy to survive. You need to be able to fund your social services. You must have good health care for people. You must have good education services. You need a thriving economy to do that. But there can't be a focus on the economy to the detriment of everything else. There must be a focus on people. There must be a focus on the planet. So you must have this balance between among the planet, the people, and the profit. And unfortunately, that's not where we are right now. I think for the past 50, 100 years, the focus has been too much on profit and not enough on planet and on people.
Interesting that. But Mr. Antoine, I also need to applaud the former administration. I know that there was very much a crackdown on much of the plastic bags and all of that have been coming into the country, and what's here now are more biodegradable. That's so very important. But probably the word is not going out as much as it should, and not as powerful as it should, as to what we can do as people, as a whole, to ensure that our planet remains safe, to ensure that we do not become extinct. I'm just using Mr. Fletcher's word, and to ensure that we do not become victims of our own folly. What are some of the things that we can do? We're going to take a break, but I'm just going to ask you now, what are some of the things that we can do? Whether it's education, enlightenment, what are some of those things that we can do so that we can affect positive changes in regards to our climate? Don't answer me now, keep that there, think about it. We're going to go to a short break, and we'll be right back. We want to let you know too that we'll be opening up the line early so that you can contribute. Give us a short break, we'll be right back.
When you need your prescription filled or you require non-prescribed medication, supplements, or all your personal needs, visit Gittins Healthcare at locations on Wall Street, Grandans, Victoria Street, Glenwood, and Central Deputy Street, Wharf. Gittins Healthcare aims to provide an exceptional personalized pharmacy experience. Additionally, children under 5 and adults 55 years and over will enjoy 10% discount on purchases of $20 and over on prescription medication. Stop settling for less. Visit Gittins Healthcare, where your health is our priority.
WeatherGuard Pro. For every project, there's only one Pro.
Notice is hereby given that the 38th Annual General Meeting of the Grenada Union of Teachers Cooperative Credit Union Limited will be held virtually on Thursday, October 13, 2022. The meeting is called for the following purposes: to receive the report of the Board of Directors and other committees for 2021, to receive the audited financial report for 2021, to elect members to the Board of Directors and other committees, to discuss and approve the budget for 2021, to appoint auditors and fix their remuneration, to take action on such matters as may come before the 30th Annual General Meeting. All members are invited to attend and to register to receive further information.
Get Ruby Gas. Get cooking. Ruby Gas. Clean, safe, and reliable LPG is the perfect solution for your commercial and everyday needs. For cooking at home or barbecuing, choose Ruby Gas LPG cylinders. Available in a variety of sizes from 20 to 100 pound cylinders. Ruby Gas LPG. Clean, safe, reliable. Are you cooking with Ruby Gas?
Get Ruby's, get going.
When a loved one passes on, we all need the comfort, support, and guidance of a trusted friend. You can rely on LaCour Brothers Funeral Home. We provide a personalized professional service that exceeds all expectations. Our dedicated staff responds to your every need with the greatest detail, ensuring affordability with a variety of options. Our upgraded state-of-the-art facilities, spacious air-conditioned chapel with live internet streaming, a modern, environmentally safe crematorium, the only of its kind on island, private viewing spaces, large on-site repast center, a modern transportation fleet. Join our burial society today and make personalized arrangements for that final moment as you prepare to enter your loved one into eternal rest. Visit or call LaCour Brothers Funeral Home and select a package that brings added comfort to the entire family. LaCour Brothers Funeral Home and Burial Society, continuing a tradition of excellence.
And welcome back to our program Beyond the Headlines, and we're addressing the very important subject matter of climate change, which is affecting the entire world, not just the industrialized countries, but we are being affected too. And though we may not be playing as significant a part in contributing to climatic changes, we still are playing some role, and we've got to be very careful about it. I know I just held you up a bit and asked you to come back and comment after the break, so Mr. Antoine, go ahead.
Yeah, in terms of the plastic, yeah, it's our first step, but as the scripture says, do not judge by appearance. Because while you have the single-use plastic bag being phased out, so you have the cloth bag and so on now, what about all the other plastics? So many things are plastic driven. We need to have a more comprehensive about how can we minimize the use of plastic overall. I mean, I don't think we can do without it. Because you have plastic everything in medical stuff and every single thing, even in contraceptive. You can't escape the plastic.
Right.
But we need to have a more comprehensive approach to this thing. Because you have, for instance, everything you go in the supermarket for is in a plastic. We need to ask ourselves, do we need to have everything in a plastic? And is there any other thing that we can use? So we need to have a better and more comprehensive policy on that. So I'm not too impressed. I mean, it's a step. I mean, we can't deny it's a step. It's a step forward.
Much more can be done.
Yeah,
you're saying.
It's like when we had the levy on plastic or white goods. We had a levy some time ago, but that money never went back into the environment. It's the same thing like the environmental levy. It really, I think I'm told that it assisted the solid waste people. But even when they wanted assistance to do things that were more innovative and so on, they didn't get the support that they need. So we need to be more comprehensive when we do things. And by the way, I meant to say earlier, climate change is a very complex subject. And if I give the impression that it's something that could be solved overnight, I'm sorry, that's not the intention. What I'm saying is that we need to take a more aggressive approach in which we look at the whole range. Like I was exposed to the issue of climate change and health through Columbia University. And Columbia University, I'm very impressed with them. They do in all areas, whether it's eye, dealing with the eye, epidemiology, I hope I'm pronouncing the word right. Everything, they have something, they're trying to integrate climate change into everything, and we need to do that. A few weeks ago, there was a thing by the Ministry of Health, and one of the calls was that to make climate change in everything, to make it central. You know, it's just like disaster risk reduction and so on. We need to make those things so that we don't talk on one hand and then we do something else on the other hand. It has to be consistent. What we do has to complement with what we say.
Okay.
I'm sure Dr. Fletcher would agree with me on that one.
So how important is it? And we just want to ask listeners, you can call in, viewers, you can call in, and the number is right there on the screen, 440-1252. You can call. We're going to stop and take in your calls because we know that this is a very important subject matter. So give us a call, give us your thoughts. If you've got a contribution which is salient to our development and the way forward, you can certainly do that. We did talk about how we go about dealing with our garbage, refuse, as the case may be, and everything is just put into a plastic bag, as we say, and it's put on the side of the road, and the truck comes around and takes everything. Can we have a better system of education where we can now work with our young people, our young children, our adults too, because they've got to pass on valuable information to young people? We're going to talk about that. I think we've got our first caller. Caller, good evening. Thanks for holding.
Greetings to your guests. I'm quite satisfied with the level of commentary being made this evening on this matter. Fully agree that climate change, global warming, and its fallout climate change is not an easy subject. It is a difficult thing and it's reached so far that it's extremely difficult. But I see a lot of hypocrisy in the leadership of Grenada and the Caribbean in general. Because we allow things to happen here. For instance, the amount of fishes goes into our waters, as we define the ocean, of course. That that creates problems for us. Our leaders have over the years allowed our wetlands to be destroyed. They have allowed people to cut down our mangrove swamps and otherwise. We know the whole works. You know, I heard from a minister one time, if we were to choose between jobs and climate change, we go for jobs. I remember that. That is the level of hypocrisy. We say one thing and we do others. But I want to ask this question of the scientists there. And Mr. Antoine, I commend you on your contribution to this cause, my dear brother. I think you're doing an excellent job. We'll chat on that afterwards. Mr. Fletcher, sir, are you satisfied that the Caribbean leaders, someone spoke of CARICOM, that cesspool of paper pushing buzzards, are you satisfied that the Caribbean leaders are doing sufficient to guarantee that our archipelago of archipelagos, the Antilles, Las Antilles, as Columbus saw it when he came, is being saved, protected from this existential threat of global warming and its fallout? I hope my question is understood. Have a nice evening, gentlemen, will you?
Thank you, Citizen Rulo. Mr. Fletcher?
Very good question, and the simple answer to his question is no. I am not satisfied that enough is being done. I think some of our leaders are much more sensitive to the issue of climate change than others. And it's always dangerous when you highlight one or two, but I'm going to highlight two of them in particular. Prime Minister Mia Mottley of Barbados, all of her statements, the statements that she has made in the international arena, I think she has been a champion, not just for Caribbean small island developing states, but for the entire community of small island developing states in holding the international community accountable for what is happening and the impact it is having on us. Now, I can't speak to what is happening in Barbados and whether Prime Minister Mottley's very eloquent, very passionate, and very impactful statements are reflected in policy actions in Barbados. That I can't speak to. But I can tell you that I'm very happy with the representation that she has been making on behalf of small island developing states in the international arena. The other Prime Minister I want to highlight is Roosevelt Skerritt of Dominica. And Prime Minister Skerritt experienced back-to-back extreme weather events. Tropical Storm Erica in 2015, that caused damage that was equivalent to 90% of his country's gross domestic product. And 2 years later, Hurricane Maria, that caused damage that was equivalent to 226% of Dominica's GDP. And immediately after the passage of Hurricane Maria, Prime Minister Skerritt announced very boldly that he was going to make Dominica the first climate resilient country in the world. A very bold, very ambitious statement that is very difficult, particularly for a country like Dominica. If you know Dominica and you've lived in Dominica, as I did, for example, for 6 months after the passage of Maria, doing some work there with the government and with UNDP, you'd know that Dominica is probably one of the most difficult islands to make climate resilient because of its topography and how dependent it is, the number of rivers, etc. that it has. But at least the Prime Minister recognized there that he had to do things differently. Not all of our prime ministers, I think, have come to that realization. Mr. Antoine was also correct when he said that I think sometimes the preoccupation is too much with lobbying the international community for funds. We need funding. There is no doubt that we need funding. The requirements for funding for all of our countries for adaptation to climate change, and that's not even putting in things like loss and damage, where you have coastlines disappearing, you have your agricultural soil being made less fertile because you have saline intrusion, all of these things that you can't even put an economic value to. We need to mobilize significant amounts of funding, but there are things that we are doing domestically that are the equivalent of shooting ourselves in the foot. So what the caller said, for example, clearing mangroves to create the next marina or to put some development for tourism is really shooting yourself in the foot. It is what we call, you opened with a Creole greeting to me. Well, I'll tell you what the Creole equivalent is in my country. It's called laver la main, essuyer la terre. And what it means is that you wash your hands and then you wipe them on the ground in the dirt. So basically you're negating what you're doing. That is what we're doing with some of these developments. When we allow the next big hotel to be built on the beach, where we know that all of the climate change models are showing that in 10, 15, 20 years' time, that entire area will be inundated from sea level rise, from storm surge, then that doesn't make sense. When we allow new developments to go to come up in areas that are prone to land slippage, that does not make sense. So yes, I think there are things that we have to do in changing land use policy. In fact, in some of our islands, in just having a land use policy in place, some countries don't have a land use policy. My own country, St. Lucia, has operated without a land use plan and a land use policy for the last 15, 20 years, and that has created a problem. You cannot say that climate change has rendered every single island. Mr. Worme, you gave some statistics for Jamaica. I dare say every single island in the Caribbean is vulnerable to climate change, some more than others. If you look at the list of vulnerability, all of these vulnerability indices that have been prepared by all of these international organizations, small island developing states in the Caribbean find themselves at the top of that list, a lot of it because of vulnerability to environmental impacts. Many of us are carrying high debt burdens, debt to GDP burdens. You know why? Because we've had to continue to borrow money to recover from and repair our country from the last disaster. And it doesn't have to be a full-blown disaster like a Hurricane Maria. Every time there's flooding, every time there's a drought and we have to assist our farmers, all of these are weather impacts that we have every single year, and that increases our debt burden. But we are also doing things that are exacerbating, that are worsening the situation, and that's why we have to change our policy. And all of our policy has to be climate informed. Our health sector, as Mr. Antoine said, and it's not just, it's things like bushfires that you're getting more often now, and what that is doing for people who have asthma or other respiratory illness. It's the impact of climate change and extreme weather events on mental wellness. I lived in Dominica for 6 months after the passage of Hurricane Maria, and I can tell you every time there was a weather system that was passing through, people were in this heightened state of anxiety because they remembered vividly what they experienced with Hurricane Maria. I'm sure anybody who lived through Hurricane Ivan in Grenada can tell you that memories in some instances still very fresh in their minds. You know, the impact of vector-borne diseases, that will increase. You'll have things like Zika and chikungunya and malaria making a comeback now because you have warmer temperatures, you have vectors that are moving into areas that they were not before. So there's so many ways in which climate change is impacting every single sector in our region. And I do not believe, to answer the question that the caller posed, that our governments have understood the need to have every single policy be climate informed, because climate is the existential threat that is impacting every single one of our islands. And we cannot have a national development plan. We cannot have a medium or long-term development strategy if it is not informed by climate change and what climate change is doing to us. And if we do not ensure that that plan and that method of development, that plan for development that we have, inculcates in us that resilience to climate change. We can't be doing one thing or saying one thing and doing something that is completely at odds, and you see that happening in some of our islands. So the short answer to your question, Cole, I'm sorry I dragged on so much, is that no, I do not believe that we have really taken this thing with the seriousness that it deserves.
Right, thanks, Mr. Fletcher. We do have a caller. He's been on the line. He or she has been on the line for quite some time. Caller, good evening, and thanks for holding. We apologize for keeping you that long.
Thank you. Good evening. Good evening, Dr. Fletcher and Mr. Antoine. Really wonderful to have these voices raise the alarm again on the problems we are having with climate change in our countries, as well as to issue a clarion call for us to do more. I think we have to do more of what we need to do and what we can do. So my question to Dr. Fletcher is, to what extent do you think the meeting coming up in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, to what extent he is looking forward to its contribution to the situation that is rapidly worsening? What should Caribbean governments bring to the table in Sharm el-Sheikh, and what should they try to take back from the table? And to Mr. Antoine, I want to ask you, what more or what different you think governments across the Caribbean, and certainly starting here in Grenada, should do? And also pose it to civil society, because I want to agree at least 3 or 4 areas of what you said. Much more education, much more resilience building, much more sustainability. But what on an immediate 5-year term would you like to see the societies undertake? Thank you, both of you. I'll listen offline.
All right. So, Mr. Fletcher, you, and then, of course, Mr. Antoine. Okay? So let's go. We'll see if we can address that in just a couple of minutes.
Yeah, where COP27 is concerned, I'm hoping that it's a lot more action-oriented than COP26. I was very disappointed with Glasgow. I found there was a kicking of the can down the road. Many of the issues that should have been addressed in Glasgow were not addressed. You had the normal naysayers coming in at the last minute and not allowing there to be the kind of action that needs to happen. There's some things that must happen. First of all, we must see greater urgency in decarbonizing societies, the economies of the developed countries. They really must move towards reducing their reliance on fossil fuels, because if not, it doesn't matter how much finance we mobilize, we will not be able to adapt to the impacts of climate change. So there must be greater urgency in climate change mitigation among the developed countries so that we can see that temperature curve coming closer to 1.5 degrees Celsius, because right now we're closer to 3 degrees Celsius. I would like to see a greater commitment to climate finance. We are not seeing the levels of climate finance being mobilized that will allow developing countries like ours in the region, and we're not seeing that money being made available. So it's one thing to say that you have climate finance available, but if you're not making it available to me, if I have to jump through hoops to get that money, then really it's of no use to me. So they have to understand that all of our islands have capacity constraints, and they have to change the rules that will allow us to access that money and access it a lot more quickly. I want to see greater attention paid to loss and damage, because loss and damage is a uniquely small island developing state issue. It speaks to those slow onset impacts. So things like ocean acidification, sea level rise, and also extreme weather events that are impacting us more than anything else. We need to see financing made available specifically for that. And the developed world is still caught up on this whole question of liability and compensation, and they can't get past that hurdle for them to have a serious conversation about loss and damage finance. So those are the 3, for me, big issues. I also want to see our Caribbean governments not wait until a COP to address climate change. And I think that's part of the problem. We get excited about climate change apart from the people who are involved in the climate change negotiations. So, for example, you have people in Grenada who have devoted their life to this. And I can think of 2 of my very good friends and colleagues, Dr. Spencer Thomas and Leon Charles, who have devoted their life to this. They live and breathe climate change every single day of their lives. But I think our leaders have to live and breathe climate change every meeting they have. It could be a WTO meeting on trade, it could be a POWER or WHO meeting on health, it could be a CTO meeting on tourism. At every single meeting, every bilateral they have, they must be pushing this issue of climate change, because it is the big thing that is preventing us from achieving all of our sustainable development goals. And the other point on civil society is extremely important. We have to mobilize civil society. Civil society will cause the politicians to move, because civil society represents the population, the voting population. If civil society says this is an issue for us, if our young people say that this is an issue for us, if civil society says that we will now start voting governments into office or voting them out based on how they treat with development and how climate informed their decisions are, then the politicians and the governments will move. So we have to educate civil society so that, one, they can do the things that they need to do at the community level to increase resilience, but also they can increase the political pressure on our governments to cause them to act with greater urgency and to match what they're saying in the international community with what they're doing domestically and regionally. So those are my responses, both to Sharm el-Sheikh and what we do at COP27, but also how we engage and mobilize civil society.
I want to give credence to our callers, and we don't like keeping them too long. Mr. Antoine, I know that there are a couple of things that you've got to chime in, but I'm just being told that we've got another call on the line. So caller, good evening. Thank you for joining the program. Go right ahead.
Good evening, Pastor Worme, and good evening to your guests. Great program. Let me take you back, Pastor Worme. Africa is a cradle to civilization, and where we have the world's greatest resource. Now, we as Africans allow the European Union and the EU and the Europeans to colonize us, to enslave us, to utilize the greatest resources of Africa to develop themselves, to fortify themselves. And now we have the backlash, which is what we cannot deal with. We cannot do without them. But there's something greater than this, Pastor Worme. We now have a nuclear war overhanging our shoulders. I am hearing nothing from our Caribbean and African leaders with a view to how to stop the war. This is more important right now than any other situation. How do we put sense in these people's head so that we together can prevent a nuclear war, which may end the life of all of us? So it's good for what we're talking now, which is great. But if a nuclear war starts now, we all are gone. So I would want to hear more about that. Let us put some energies in that, how we could get this nuclear war that is overshadowing us, overhanging us now, to be stopped or to be prevented. Thank you. Good night, sir.
Thank you. Much appreciated. Yes, Mr. Antoine, so let's go right back to you.
To your last caller, I don't think there'll be any nuclear war soon. It will be to everybody's disadvantage. The threat of nuclear war is only to kind of divert people's attention.
But let's also say that being a student of the Bible, we know what the Bible says. People are concerned about the entire world being annihilated and no life on earth. That's not going to happen. The scripture is very clear about certain things. So whatever we do, we have to do and have to conclude from the content and context of scriptures. That should help to also form our...
Yeah, but I think it's one way of diverting our attention, because to me it's all still to keep the fossil fuel industry going, because the threat of war, these folks are going back on whatever agreement they made. Mm-hmm. Like look, Germany, they were going to give up nuclear stuff, and they're going back, and all the coal and everything. Somebody wants to get a last minute profit. I mean, if you look deep, you will see that. But I want to answer the question the caller asked earlier. And I just thought I would say that the nuclear thing, and maybe we need to have a conversation over those things, because I don't let myself influenced by the so-called CNN and whatever. There are other ways you could inform yourself. I mean, not to be ignorant, but to be informed. Okay. And a lot of those things is propaganda to get you, sway you on one side. And don't forget, capitalism needs war to thrive. The history has shown you that. They need war. Whether it's World War II, World War I, World War III. So they need war. Yeah. Anyway, my question to that, I hope I remember. For one of the things that need to be done, the people need to be involved. Like, nobody knows, and I try to ask people within the government system, what is the priority for Grenada in this corp? And nobody could tell you. Because there's a well-kept secret. And we know we have a new government, so I'm not bashing the new government. But at least because government is a continuum, and it's about the people should know what are the priority. I remember the late Dr. Hugh Seeley said in a session I was in last year that the issue was going to be mainly loss and damage. And I'm glad that Dr. Fletcher mentioned that, although it's a sticking point. Recently I read that Norway is the first country that decided that they're going to really give some fund to that. I haven't read the details about it, but this is an issue. Of course, the Caribbean leaders met in Bahamas. There was no real communication to the people afterwards. We need to engage people about what is happening so that people could influence. This is not the purview of governments alone. So that's one. Secondly, we need to involve civil society at a more fundamental level and with more respect, not just tick in the box and conveniently. And I'll give you an example how a few years ago when the former regime wanted to get some money for the Joy Forest, they find a way to co-opt my organization, Friends of the Earth, on a so-called advisory committee. And because we take our task seriously, we were interested in being, supportive. And every time I ask about when there's going to be a meeting of this advisory committee, nobody could attend. And eventually, one of the officials tell me, "You have to be an idiot to think that was going to happen." He said that was only for public relations and to get the money. So groups should not be used conveniently for public relations. We come with a certain amount of authenticity, a certain amount of credibility that we could add. And in that respect, Our organization needs to be strengthened, not weakened as that been done over the last 2 decades or so, where, I mean, there have been systematic efforts to weaken the organization, deport members, like one of our members was deported, stripped of his citizen and deported. Although, I mean, most people didn't say a word. I mean, there are some of us who've been victimized, harassed, everything, because what we're saying is the same thing we're saying here. And because it is not coming down too well for the public, for the leaders, they take offense, notwithstanding that. And we make a lot of contribution, notwithstanding that. All the consultants that come, they come to us. Even we have been making contribution to the new budget, to the new round of budget. And we give really, not just my organization, I'm talking about civil society, but it's not even adhered to, not even respected. Look, we have a National Climate Change Committee. Who knows about that? Who is on the committee? These are things we need to know, and these are the things that we need to get people involved with. I am convinced that people don't need much information at this point in time. You know, what they need is inspiration. What they need is support. Okay. What they need is sort of to be brought along. And in that respect, I'm challenging the new government to really rethink how we do the National Climate Change Committee, and also the social impact. That thing that was between all the sectors. There is a blueprint to work together. The previous government did not allow it to work because before even it could be implemented, they violated certain principles, and civil society didn't sign it. Although we were supportive of it. We want to see that come back, and they invented that because to satisfy the world, the IMF. But we need to get that back. So there's a lot of things we need to do. Right. You know, the EU, sorry, yes. The EU, through the non-state actors, had set up this mechanism where non-state people could make contribution, and this was sabotaged by the last government. Under the Cotonou and the ports of the Lomé and Cotonou, there's a role for civil society, and it's spelled out in the EU agreement, but they sabotage it.
All right, so just hold on right there, Mr. Antoine. We're going to go back to the line. Somebody's on the line. Good evening. Caller, good evening. All right, we might well have lost the caller.
So they sabotage. So, I mean, we need to understand. In fact, NGOs was something that came around after the war, Second World War. First time they started using NGOs with the United Nations system. There's a role for us. There's a role for us. And anything, because you don't fit in with government thing, you're political. But let me tell them, I've never had any ambition to be a politician. Whatever I do, because I feel inspired to do it. Since I was young, I'm doing whatever I've been inspired to do, whether it's to deal with the library, culture, anything like that. It's not because I have political ambition. And I'm sure a lot of other people are like that. But don't label us. And so that we could inspire other young people. Look, we talk about Greta Thunberg or whatever her name. Where's our own people? There were young people that's coming up around Friends of the Earth. Every time a young person emerged, they were snatched and frightened.
Okay. Yeah, that's a shame. We do have a call on the line, don't we? Oh, sorry. Yes. So there must be conversation, obviously, and not just conversation. It's interesting you said that. It's more than just education. They need inspiration.
Yeah, people need it.
There are quite a lot of information circling there. So I don't think that there's necessarily a lack of information. Now, how can you take that information that you have and now inspire people to be in the vanguard, to step out, to be able to be vocal, to be very convicted about something as important as climate change?
Listen to people. Listen to people. We don't listen to one another in this place now. We dismiss people. And I was saying something in relation to a death of a young person. We don't listen to what people are feeling. We judge them before we hear them. I mean, let me say to this. When I used to be on the international circuit much, for folks who are sympathetic to developing countries, people in the NGO movement who have their time and resources, we don't have the time and resources, who is in Brussels and Washington and so on, told me, look, in your country, they told other people too, but in your country, we want you to tell your negotiators and them that when they come to meeting, they could check us out. We could help them, give them information. I came and nobody was willing to listen, including Patrick Antoine. I sent many kind of information. They don't listen to you. So we suffer from that because who is the messenger? Huh? So the thing about it is that we all have a role to play. Look what is happening here tonight. I mean, we should have more of that. And not because we want to go to, I've never gone to an international meeting. I've never represented any government delegation, although in 2008, 2010, people were calling my name with a delegation, and it wouldn't happen because I'm not as diplomatic.
Interesting that. So we want to look, and maybe because we're coming a little closer to the end of the book and just looking at the clock on the wall, we do have some time. But can we now therefore identify some, what we may call easy, effective ways that we can make a difference? Because we can have this program and we can talk about all the effects of climate change and what is happening and all the negatives. What are some things that we can do, simple things that we can do, so that we can make effective changes? And I don't think you've got to be the most brilliant minds in the world. So Mr. Fletcher, just tell us a few things. I know that some of them may have been mentioned early on in the program, but just a few things in very simple language that every listener, every viewer can be convicted and be convinced to get involved. Let's do something differently so that we can make this world a better place environmentally.
We need to education and engagement has to be at the center of all of this. One of the things that I did 2 years ago, I started this project called the Caribbean Climate Justice Project that is really looking to educate and empower Caribbean civil society on climate change, but also, very importantly, to bring the issue of climate justice to the forefront so that we can see how do we cause there to be transformative justice for those people who are most vulnerable and being impacted by climate change. And we focus our attention a lot on the young people in the Caribbean. And I was amazed at just how, one, interested young people are in the issue of climate change. You don't need to do any convincing with them. They understand the issue. And also how engaged they are. We have this concept of young people in the Caribbean thinking that, oh, they're indifferent, that they're not passionate. They are. We just put out this book called Where is the Justice? An anthology of Caribbean youth perspectives on the climate crisis. That is really a compilation of the perspectives of young people in the Caribbean on climate change. So we need to engage civil society, first of all, so that they understand the issues clearly. They have to be part of decision making. We must bring them to the table so that they're empowered. They know what the issues are, and they can have an input into it. That's at the national level. At the individual and household levels, there are things that we can do. We started speaking about some of them. The issue of recycling, the issue of making changes in your water, your use of water, conserving water. One of the things, when I was a minister of responsibility for the water sector, and it pained me to see that in a country that is water starved, that has a water insecurity problem during the dry months, that we have a water utility company, the Water and Storage Company, that is collecting water at the various watersheds, using electricity to transport that water, pump it to a treatment center, treating that water, making it potable, and then sending it to people's homes, and then we promptly flush that water down a toilet, or we use it to wash our cars or to water our garden. Now, that makes no sense. But yet we have all of this rainwater that is that we collecting, well, we should be collecting on our islands, but it's going to waste. So why aren't we promoting rainwater harvesting to help us to deal with this issue of water insecurity? Why aren't we promoting kitchen gardens to help us with this issue of food security? Why aren't we insisting that we have land use plans so that the limited land space that we have on each of our islands, that we make maximal use of it, so that we can, first of all, grow crops that are suited to the microclimates that we have in our country? So in the north of your island, if the north of your island is the drier part of the island, as it is for my country, then we grow crops that are more drought tolerant than the crops that we grow in the other parts of the island. We're not doing that. There are things that we need. We need to start now tailoring our development and tailoring our culture to suit this new lifestyle that climate change is forcing on us. And I think that is where the issue lies. We need to ensure that our tourism is a more eco-driven tourism, that our hotels are not dumping sewage into our oceans, but they're treating that sewage, and that you get gray water that they can use for irrigation. But we're not worsening the situation that they're capturing rainwater and they're using it to irrigate their lawns and to flush their toilets. There are things that we can do where renewable energy is concerned, with solar photovoltaic panels, ensuring that every single house is heated by a solar water heater, that we're not designing buildings that during the day in a tropical climate we need to have air conditioning and lighting, because we've designed our buildings, offices in such a way that we have to keep lights on in a country where there's an abundance of sunshine. And now with the price of electricity being what it is, again, that makes no sense. So there must be a change in our mindset that will cause us to at least reduce our vulnerability. Have early warning systems in place, so you know, okay, if there is a weather system moving in, you know which areas of the country are the most vulnerable, and you could get the people and the animals, the livestock, the pets out of harm's way, so that you could minimize the loss of life. These are all things that we can do and we should be doing in order to increase our resilience and reduce our vulnerability. But we're not doing that, and we're also not learning from each other. So a hurricane hit Dominica. We did not learn from the experiences of Dominica. A hurricane hit BVI. We did not learn from the lessons of the BVI. How many of the lessons that Grenada should have learned from Ivan do you see now reflected in the way in which development takes place in Grenada? How many of the experiences that St. Lucia got from Hurricane Thomas do you see reflected in the way in which we are pursuing? It's as if we start every year with a clean slate and we do not learn from the experiences of our neighbors and of our past. And that makes no sense.
Thanks for holding. Good evening, caller.
Good evening, Mr. Worme. Pardon me, I beg your indulgences one more just for this one last intervention. I am extremely concerned about what I hear about on a daily basis in Brazil and the Amazon. Of course, the Amazon and all the trees and the extent of land is in Brazil, sovereign territory. But we all know what that area of the world means for the existence of our archipelagos here on this side. Mr. Fletcher, as a scientist, are you concerned in any way of the destruction of the Amazon? And do you think that our Caribbean leaders are doing sufficient or have been doing anything in any way to put pressure on the Brazilian government and authority to desist from destroying the forest in effect, which is essential for our own existence here? Thank you very much.
Well, Paula, the Amazons have been referred to as the lungs of our planet. That's where you have the greatest collection of forest area. But you've had a president in Brazil, Bolsonaro, who has basically declared war on the environment, and he has pursued an agenda that is as environmentally unfriendly as you can get. My only comfort is that with the elections in Brazil, it's still looking close, that Lula at least was some percentage points ahead of Bolsonaro, and hopefully with the runoff that Mr. Bolsonaro will lose the election in Brazil and we can see some good sense returning to the politics of Brazil. But it's difficult. I mean, what can the Caribbean, what kind of economic power does the Caribbean have to cause Bolsonaro to change his policies where his war on the environment is concerned. There are countries with more economic might that have tried to convince Bolsonaro that what he is doing is wrong, that is, he's not just putting Brazil and the Amazon in peril, but he's putting the entire world in peril. And Bolsonaro has gone ahead and done what he feels that he needs to do, driven by whatever ambitions or whatever policies that he has. So, yes, we should be very concerned about what is going on in the Amazon, but I do not know that our Caribbean leaders had or have the type of economic influence or political clout to cause Bolsonaro to do anything differently. And as I said, the only hope we can cling on to is that Mr. Bolsonaro loses the runoff that will take place between himself and President Lula, and that we can see a regime with a little bit more environmental good sense taking the reins of power in Brazil, and we can see a stop of this crazy destruction that has been taking place in the Amazon under Bolsonaro's reign.
Yes, interesting. Yes, Mr. Antoine, you want to follow up on?
Yeah, I think
you did mention about it a little early on.
The thing about it, I think people, one of the things that come out of that, we understand the value of the Amazon to us as a people, because sometimes people dismiss it, that have nothing to do with us, but it have everything to do with us. Whether we're able to influence what happens down there is another question. But we should be concerned. And at the citizen level, we have to try and form alliances. Right now, I'm in touch with some black groups in the States that are trying to, highlight the effect of climate change on African American and indigenous people. We need to find more of those linkages so that we could have synergies between the people who are vulnerable, the people who are marginalized, and so on. And who are affected more in the Amazon? The people, the inhabitants, original people. So we have to be concerned.
Yeah, but we also have to have our own concerns here in Grenada. Yeah. We had a massive hurricane here back in 2004, devastated the country, devastated the economy in the country, and quite frankly, we lost a lot of trees. We lost a lot of coconut trees. I really couldn't understand why there wasn't a campaign, for example, for the restoration of coconut trees, for example. There were the days, when we went on our coconut tree, Mr. Antoine, I'm sure you can remember those days, and all you had to do was to go and pick up coconuts. You have your cutlass and you open up the coconuts, you bring it back to your mother, and they do all different things with it, whether it's to cook with it or to make oil, as the case may be. And we didn't hear anybody talking about that. We've been cutting down trees, but have we been replanting? Have we been replacing them? So these are valuable things that we need to look at.
Nobody have talked about Dr. Gallo Marcel, who the greatest respect for, have been talking about us planting 7,000 breadfruit and coconut trees. I mean, in fact, and I don't know if Dr. Fletcher could comment on that subsequently. Coconut plant, we say not a tree but a plant, is one of the most resilient plants. And in fact, it could maneuver hurricanes and so on. In the Bay of Bengal, palm tree, I think it's palm. There are certain trees that have survived the harshest weather. They can swing, they can sway.
Yeah.
And I think palm trees and neem trees in the Bay of Bengal. There's a lot of things we can learn from other places. But I'm asking myself the question, what is the value of our students? What is the value of, we don't even have a think tank. And let me plug in here. The Sustainable Development Council, which came in about 1994, which was a platform for all kinds of things being discussed, although a lot of time, they just used to listen, let it flow. But it was a basis for all kinds of conversation to take place. It doesn't happen. Because for some reason it had been under-resourced, it had been abused by mainly the former administration, and probably not resourced enough by the version of this government between 2008 and 2013, but particularly the former government. They have not really valued which it could, and maybe now we need to be reinvigorate the Sustainable Development Council, because when the Sustainable Development functioned at a certain level, we would have known what Grenada was taking to the COP going. Even though we might not have much input, but they will come, discuss, we will tear it apart, so whatever, and make suggestions, even though it wasn't always accepted. But no, there's no conversation. Of course, COVID didn't help. So the Sustainable Development Council is one of the institutions that my organization, Friends of the Earth, been in our manifesto over the years, been asking to be resourced, better resourced, and also respected, and become institutionalized. So there's some things, and to answer the question that you asked Dr. Fletcher, what we can do, there's a lot of little things. For instance, when the New York people was here about the making St. George's resilient, climate resilient, one of the things I suggested to them, maybe they could help us to restore the library. And they said, well, that's not an issue, because if the government wanted, they could have get support assistance to rebuild a library. So I said, all right. I mean, they wouldn't go that direction. So I said, well, maybe you could help TAMCC to set up a department. For instance, any people wanting any information on the environment, on climate change, they can go, because if you want information on climate change or ecological related subject, where can you go in Grenada? And there's hundreds and thousands of books every month, different publications coming out. Why are we not making it possible for our citizens to have access to those information? That they could become informed. And by the way, there's a new survey by UE right now that asking whether the need for it just came in today in my email, whether there is a need for a new degree integrated dealing with climate change. And probably is a good time for that.
Interesting, yes.
Yeah.
Very
so we need to make it more, I mean, it has to become what we eat, drink, and I mean, it has to become, and not synthetic, it's not just because there's money to chase. I mean, Dr. Fletcher said money is important, but it has to be that because we are facing an existential threat through climate change, and while we have to hold those people who have endangered and decimated these parts responsible, we have to take a level of responsibility that we don't further, cause the degradation.
Yes.
We have to.
In essence, we have our responsibility.
We have, and a great one too.
And we need to.
And that's where inspiration and leadership comes in, by all.
And we need to shoulder that. Well, we're getting close to the end of our program. So what we'd like you to do, Mr. Fletcher, I want to thank you so much for coming. Maybe you've got a few thoughts that you want to leave with us, and then I've got Mr. Antoine right here in the studio with me. So we want to treat our visitors and give them that sort of privilege and credence. And I think you've got some information for us. Yeah. So we're going to get closer to the end of the program. Then you'll give us some information. Some closing thoughts from you, Mr. Fletcher?
I'd like to see greater collaboration among Caribbean countries and among Caribbean institutions on this issue of climate change. We have many regional institutions that in some way or the other are doing work in climate change. You have CIMH, for example, the Caribbean Institute of Meteorology and Hydrology, that is collecting a lot of the information, the statistical information that can be used by our governments to strengthen their case when they go to finance institutions like the Green Climate Fund for funding. We have the 5 Cs, the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center. We have institutions in our region that work very well, and many of them, to some extent or the other, have taken on climate change, have taken climate change on board. We need to get that. We need to increase that. We need to get collaboration among our regional institutions and among our governments so that we can present a united front to the international community. One of the things that worked really well for us in 2015 when we were lobbying and when we were negotiating for the Paris Agreement was we had a series of meetings throughout the year where we brought our negotiators and our ministers together so everybody was on the same page. I would like to see that not just reinvigorated, but bring Caribbean civil society on board so that we can get that information distilling out through our civil society organizations so that they know what's going on. They can take this to the grassroots level. They can engage our civil society organizations so that everybody understands that this is a fight that everyone has to be involved in. I would like to see our politicians elevate climate change, our ministers of government elevate climate change to the point where every single discussion that they have, every bilateral, every multilateral engagement, could be with the World Bank, with the IMF, with the Q80 Fund, with the Taiwanese or the Chinese, depending on who you have your diplomatic relations with. Every single discussion has to have an element of climate change because that is the one issue that is impacting all of us and will escalate as the years go by. But I think also, very importantly, going back to this question of education so that we can understand what we can do at a household and a community level to increase our level of resilience, to reduce our vulnerability, because we have to live with climate change for the rest of our lives. We will have to live with more extreme weather events, with droughts, with sea level rise, with stronger hurricanes, with impacts on health, all of these things. So we have to know what can we do at the household level to increase our resilience and to learn from our neighbors, be they neighbors within the region or neighbors in the Pacific, what they're doing. There has to be a greater level of South-South cooperation. You know, for too long, our focus has been on the North, the developed countries in helping us. But there are countries that have a similar level of development that can help us out. We need to see more cooperation within our Caribbean region and more South-South cooperation so that we can increase our resilience as small island developing states. Those are some of the things I would like to see us do, in addition to increasing the lobbying so that we can put pressure and intensify the pressure on the countries that are the cause of the problem, because we cannot lose sight of the fact that we are in a crisis right now, not because of a landfill in Grenada or because of a hotel development in St. Lucia. We are in a crisis right now because the United States, the European countries, Russia, Japan, China, these are the countries that have been emitting greenhouse gases that have caused the temperature of our planet to increase and that have caused climate change. They have a moral responsibility to address this problem, and we have to increase pressure on them so that they can do something about it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Fletcher, and thank you for all your salient contribution to the program tonight. You've been extraordinarily resourceful, and we do respect your intelligence, and we wish you all the best, and convey our greetings to whoever we may know in St. Lucia, and continue to enjoy the rainy conditions, please. And as I said a little earlier on, send some Grenada way. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, pleasure.
So I want to also thank Dr. Fletcher for agreeing to come on and that I can share the same platform with him. I've been looking for that a long time now.
Well, it has happened.
Yeah. But you want me to talk about what?
Yes, your closing note, and I think you've got some information you need to give them.
Okay, I think this may be or should be the beginning of deeper conversation. There is a civil society climate action group which I'm part of, which is coming out of a project with Canary. And the idea is that to enable civil society to be more proactive and to be more, influential in helping to get the climate change issue more embedded in the society. So I'm glad that GBN have taken on that. But from a position of, and also I would ask people to make use of all the free in inverted commas opportunity, like from Columbia University. There's so much going on. Even there are other universities, I know it's in the north, but we don't have the resources at the moment. And then also in Trinidad, the earth nurse and earth medics, there are a lot of things we can learn through. Yeah. And nowadays with technology, you don't have to leave your place. So that one. But also, consistent with Friends of the Earth activity, philosophy, we are engaging all the time. For instance, coming up to World Food Day, we have a big activity, a webinar, in which we have people like Dr. Gaido Marcel, will be one of the panelists, Dr. Tessa Barry, Dr. Francis Martin, Dr. Cheryl Rock. She's a Barbadian out at Long Beach, California, California State University at Long Beach. She's a food scientist. And then we have Mr. Steve McMeo, who would be on the panel.
Okay.
And we want people to join it.
For?
On the 16th of October.
That's a Sunday, is it?
Yes, Sunday, to mark World Food Day. And it's a deal, the theme is heat, food, and our health in the context of climate crisis.
Okay.
So that is one of the things that we have. And in addition, we also have a series of conversation on leadership. We have had 2 so far for the year, and we continue right the Caribbean-wise and the diaspora. In trying to get people to think about leadership, not necessarily government, but leadership, doing what you can.
Yes.
You know, where you are.
Yes.
Whether you're a preacher, teacher, a parent, leadership for everybody. And not just for a special group of people.
Agreed.
Yeah, what we are doing here is leadership.
That's correct.
In a way. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Well, you know, I probably was not the biggest fan of the revolution. I'm sure that a lot of people know that by now. It's not that I was against much of its plans and programs. I think the revolution had some great plans and great programs and great activities. Interestingly, every year was pronounced a year of something, and there was tremendous emphasis on that particular year. Maybe we should think about a year of environmental awareness. It may sound simple, and there's a concentration on that environmental awareness throughout the year, and then another year you can take it and put the year of education or whatever the case is. But these are very important things that we need to really look at. And let me tell you this, God has given us this planet, and He put us in this planet. And the original mission, the original cultural mandate that God gave to man was to dress the earth and to keep it. And this dress the earth and to keep it does not just talk about cultivation and farming, but it talked about the holistic looking after and taking care of our earth. That was a principal mandate, which I believe still remains intact for us today. All of us got our part to play, and if we can hold hands together, use all the information and education that we have, and combine our expertise, I'm sure that the world as a whole can be a much better and much safer place. And Grenada can be a shining beacon and an example of environmental friendliness. So we want to thank all of you who have, in one way or the other, contributed to the program tonight. We want to thank our 2 panelists for coming on board and doing this voluntarily. And we want to, of course, thank those of you who called in and gave your expressions. We certainly do appreciate that. So until next time, same station, same place. Stephenson, Worme, signing out. Have a good night.